Welcome to episode 75 of the Seed Farmer Podcast, the podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Turnersoil Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. Today's episode is another episode of words of advice for seed people. Every conversation I have with seed growers, I end the conversation with two questions for my guests. What would you tell your younger seed growing self? And what would you say to market growers to inspire them to start growing seed? I love the answers I get. There's some of my favorite parts of the conversations, though all the parts of the conversations are, of course, my favorites. But I really enjoy these parts of each conversation. And it's always interesting to hear what folks say and how some of it is similar to what other folks say, and some of it's very different. And I find that contrast and similarity really inspiring and provides a lot of food for thought. And that's why here's another Words of Advice episode. So this episode is the answers from episodes 16 through 25, so 10 episodes in mostly chronological order. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast. Supporting the show financially really helps the show keep going. There's a number of costs to get this episode to you. You know, there's the hosting costs, there's the post-production editing costs, and then there's all the time that goes into organizing conversations, booking interviews, doing some research before I sit down with different seed farmers, and then the actual conversations themselves. And then at the end, you know, listening to the conversations again and making sure their post-production highlights what each seed farmer is trying to share with all of you. And so I love doing this work. I love these conversations. And if you love listening to these conversations, I'd encourage you to consider supporting the podcast financially if you have the means. And you can do that at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast. And I really also appreciate all the other ways that you support the show. I love it when you share your favorite episodes with other farmers and other people. I love it when you tell about the show and rant about the show, hopefully in a positive way. And I love all your 5-star reviews. So thank you for all the support and for listening. And now, words of advice for seed people. As I mentioned, these words of advice come from episodes 16 to 25 of the Seed Farmer podcast. This actually corresponds to the second season that I recorded with no-till growers a couple years ago. And one thing that's exciting about this season, and that's fun to hear as I re-listen to these words of advice, is how these episodes really travel all over the world, beyond Canada and the US. This means that you're hearing words of advice from seed people in many different contexts and situations who grow different kinds of crops in different kinds of places. Our first words of advice come from Heron Breen of Fruits of Our Labors. This is from episode 22. And I should point out, and I think we mentioned it in the episode, but the abbreviation of Fruits of Our Labors, FOOL, is fool. And so I think that's the kind of wisdom we want to start this episode with. And I'll point out that Heron's the one who's pointed out that does abbreviate to fool, and it's intentional. But I don't think that in any way undervalues the actual wisdom that Heron brings in his answers and with all his contributions to the seed community.
Oh, I don't know if it would be about the seed growing. But I think I wish I'd started earlier. I think that's, I wish I had, it's always a huge thing is like, geez, if I knew what I knew now when I was 28, then I would be so much further. So, trusting your instincts, trial and error, stick with it. There was a transition in my farm in that space where I was selling produce and working with seed, and that was the right thing. I was lucky to make that transition and also have a day job, which I think is also, it's like that balance, like I explained, where I was working like 2 jobs basically. It was necessary. There's not enough money in my region, I think, either to just be strictly a farmer in many cases, some cases, or to be strictly a seed farmer. So I find that most farms traditionally, somebody had an off-farm job, even going back over the last 100 years, whether they cut wood or they drove a bus or they did a bunch of different things. I think a lot of folks say, oh, I'm trying to make money just farming. And I'm like, that is kind of a rare thing. And I think that if I had kind of like known that balance was the way, I wouldn't have kind of felt like I was a failure because I couldn't make money just farming enough, quote, to survive. So, I think there's a lot of we look at ourselves very self-critical, a lot of failure feelings in farming or in our work because we should be able to make a living. What's wrong with me that I'm not doing this, quote, more efficiently? It must be a failure in my crop planning. And of course, all those things we have growth curves on. But I think it's just important to know, farming is often one part of a person's income. And it really does take a lot of capital investment. And oftentimes folks that are successful, maybe they have a generational base of equipment and land that allows them to just farm. But even in that case, I often find those folks are driving a bus or doing something else. So it doesn't mean it shouldn't be a certain way, but it's not a failure to have an off-farm job. Yeah, for me, it was really because I thought these and discovered that there was these really tasty, unique varieties. And then I couldn't either get the seed for them or consistently get the seed for them. And so it became a niche for my farm to grow specialty produce. And the seed production was the way that I'd created that avenue. So that was where it started for me. And I think that's, I don't know, I've heard this story from a lot of farmers where somebody gave them a special tomato. They're like, oh, this is my family's, paste tomato. I just want you to have it. You guys are so nice and grow the seed. And then that becomes something that everybody at the farmers market is looking forward to. I also found that in my breeding work, people were really excited to taste mixed cases of melons. They were like, oh, every one of these is different. And I like that. So so that was kind of interesting to start selling like half cases of breeder mix melons. Or if you have a CSA, to be able to share this diversity and bring people into the selection process for them to taste, tell you which melons they liked and be part of the seed saving or the sort of selection process is really exciting. So there's ways where seed extraction, finding something that really has got a market niche, that whether with your customers in the market, in the farmer's market, or with a chef or what have you, that seems to be a really good gateway to start with, like 1 or 2 really special varieties, and they can end up being like signature varieties for you. And that's how it sort of started in my farm. I actually never really thought I was going to do seed work. The truth is, I actually wanted to grow nursery stock. I was was interested in having a fruit tree nursery, and this produce thing was going to be the annual income that supported the long-term nursery. But the nursery thing kind of got subsumed in the seed work, and we kind of fully went into the seed work.
Now, the next words of advice come from episodes 16 through 18. First, we have Kim Delaney of Hawthorn Farm Organic Seeds. And Kim is based in Ontario, not that far from here, but I don't get to go and see her as much as I would like to. Luterra is based in Oregon, and Mark is actually the designer of the Winnow Wizard, which is a ever-recurring theme in these episodes. It's one of the things that comes up more than anything is the Winnow Wizard, and folks love them. And these words of advice don't actually touch on the Winnow Wizard directly. So if you want to hear about the Winnow Wizard, you got to go and listen to episode 17 of this episode. And then we go a little further afield for some advice from Gabriel Bravo of Semillas Plantae in Costa Rica.
I tell my younger self that you're about to enter like this kind of like magical story called Seeds, and that my job would be to observe, like to listen, to look, to learn about this world, learn from the plants as well as from people doing that work. After doing that, I think I would tell myself that keep learning, and find where you belong in that sort of dance. Find what you as a human, where you belong in this seed story. So like sometimes people will look and say, oh, you sell seed. They'll look at me and say, you sell seed. And well, that's the least of what I do. That's sort of an end product, and that's not the important part. The important part is to find out how, I would tell my younger self, find where you fit in that story. And then once you know, learn from the soil, learn from wildlife, the birds and the deer, and learn from all the animals, learn from the weather patterns, the snow, and the people. And then I would finally say, when you know, you need to share. You share this information. And it's not just about learning all that stuff so you can have a business and sell seed. It's about learning all that stuff so that one day you can share all this information with everybody. And to realize that sometimes I like to think, well, if we ever lived in a world where we didn't need money, wouldn't that be something like we didn't all have to make a living? You know, I would tell my younger self that you would still do this work. This is important work. So the end product is more about finding where you fit into that whole dance. That's what I would say. Seed can adapt to your farm. So when I started growing San Marzano tomato, the Italian paste tomato, I wanted to get, the real deal. So I got the seed from Italy and I planted it. And Italy has way more heat units than we do here in Ontario. And it barely ripened the first year. So I saved seed from the tomatoes that did ripen, planted them out the next year, and repeated that process for a number of years until I had a strain of San Marzano that was ripening, that tasted great, was the shape of the traditional tomato and was ripening here in my climate. So if farmers, they can adapt things to their farm as well. So those are the two sort of key, I think, points that I hope would make some farmers interested in at least attempting to save seed for one thing, maybe two on their farm.
I would tell my younger seed growing self to relax a little bit. And when I first got into seed, it's like, oh, the rain's going to ruin the lettuce. We got to get all the lettuce in. We got to, this is out on tarps and it's going to rain. We got to pull it up. And I'm a little bit of a vigilant person of like, okay, I got to do this thing at the right time or everything's going to be ruined. And I guess in all the years growing seed, it's like, okay, seed got wet, put it in the dryer. It's okay. Seed's a pretty resilient thing most of the time. And so I guess I would tell my younger seed growing self to relax a little bit, and it's usually okay. Well, seed is fun. It's something different. It is on an annual schedule. So, if you're tired of picking lettuce every week or picking carrots every week, you can harvest the seed once. It's on a different kind of schedule. It's also, if you calculate it, the value you get from a kale plant that has gone to seed, dollar-wise, if you were to buy that seed, is pretty high compared to the value you get selling those kale leaves. And so it's certainly, if it's something you have the capacity to explore, invest in, and you have a significant seed purchase budget, you can also save substantial money that way. Of course, I work for seed companies that sell to market growers, so it's not really my interest to say save your own seed, don't buy it. But yeah, that's definitely true.
I used to be a farmer market for many years. I did the whole thing, went every weekend. We managed to create a CSA company as well. We sold it recently to try and dedicate ourselves exclusively to the seed production, but I'm quite related to the whole thing. And I'm always preaching now with the seed company about diversity, because Costa Rican vegetable culture is very standardized. Again, it's a worldwide thing, but specifically here, like if you go to the conventional farmers market or even to the organic farmers markets, you're always getting the same things, always getting the same kind of tomatoes, the same kind of cucumbers, the same kind of eggplants, the same kind of lettuces, you name it, right? So I understand that the market is always looking for the commercial characteristics, like the red, hard, round tomato that people are used to, right? But with our companies or our projects and preaching about agrodiversity, I'm always telling to the farmers when we do conferences with the company or visit like communities of farmers, like it could be a game changer if you guys start diversifying the offer that you have in your stands or your CSAs or your, like there's a lot of tomatoes, a lot of open pollinated tomatoes that do very well in growing conditions that have very special characteristics that no other farmer has out there, right? So you can start creating differentiated markets. You can start educating people about diversity. You can stop competing like ferociously with all the other farmers that are out there with exactly the same hybrids that you are growing. So I'm not saying 100% of the production, but let's say that 20% of your production is specialized on something completely new and something completely different that is going to be out there, and there's going to be, and I think there's a demand for it. Like when I used to be a vegetable farmer and we had the stands, like we were famous in the market for it. Like some people say like, oh yeah, I'm coming here because someone told me that you guys are the weird farmers, right? You got like weird stuff right here or something like that, right? Not in the bad way, but saying like, I always corrected them, like, it's not weird. It's just different, right? And when they tried it or they have, I don't know, a blue tomato or the purple carrot or something very new to them or very different, and they tried it and they went back home, a lot of them were coming back next week saying like, you got more? No, I loved it. It was the best tomato I've had, and so on and so on and so on, right? So I think as farmers, we're very standardized, and it's very hard to change our mindsets into trying new things.
Now we have the words of advice from episodes 19 through 21. Episode 19 is with Manish Kushwaha of Gaia Organic Seeds, who's not that far from me. And then we head over to Dorset in the UK to hear from Ellen Rignell of Winnow Farm Seeds. And then back to Oregon to talk with Katie Kulla. In addition to having been a seed grower, Katie is also the author of a book called Farm Raised Kids. And if you're raising kids in a farm situation, or you know somebody who is, I think this is a fantastic read.
I wouldn't advise anybody to start without a plan. Always work with a plan. Have a plan. If you work without a plan, you would be exhausted and burned out. Because as new gardeners, like we all take on so much. We are so excited about like everything. Oh wow! Oh, this is exciting. Oh wow! The whole gardening craze takes you over. So I think like I'll advise like everybody to like. I mean, it's very hard in the very beginning because you don't know like what will make money or like what is the best model of operating. So like it's a lot of like trial and error that happens in the beginning. But I think like with good research, with good advice from good people, you can make a decent plan that you can be happy with to work with, and just stick to the plan, and of course there'll be like variation to like accommodate, but like have that plan and stick with it so you don't burn yourself out, That's my advice to my younger self, Yeah, like I visit a lot of farms like locally, and I see like a lot of like CSA farmers. They have so many stuff like going to seed, and they have left to one field. They don't have time to take care of it. They're managing other thing. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of lettuce seeds here. You could harvest that. but like, I think there's always an opportunity in a market garden farmer to like save seeds. I think depending on like what they are growing. I think if they right off the bat, if they plan things right, I think they do have like opportunity to like save seeds from many of their crops, depending on how far apart they are planting their seeds. I think like yes, I would encourage market farmers to accommodate. I mean, maybe like you would offer a workshop like what crosses or not crosses easily, in different families, but like I think there is an opportunity there to like save seeds from like many crops. I think like if they're only growing one kind of mustard, they can see one kind of mustard. If they can plant one tomato seeds 80 feet apart from one of the other crops, if they have space for it, then they have tomato seeds, which is like quite pure, And even if one of their peppers, if they have peppers in one of their hoop houses, and if they can put screens to like not have no insect population going in, then they have good pepper seeds for next year. The pepper seeds like they last like 4 years. So it's like what an opportunity to save money in their seed costs. But I understand like for many market gardeners, they might not want. They're quite busy in the summer, so I can understand like sometimes it can seeds can get away from them, and from their budget, maybe seeds are a cheaper option to like invest into instead of like saving them. But I think like knowing that like seeds growing in their own farm is more adaptable and it will keep getting better and better every year. I think that's what the cost of investment in the seeds they should save.
A lot of the work is you're upright. And that is a big selling point for a lot of growers. There's none of this bending down business. I mean, I think, that's definitely a selling point. I think it's important to say that like seed growing isn't really easy. It's not like totally simple, particularly if you're growing in a kind of wet climate. It's actually quite hard. And for me, the really important thing is to surround yourself with a community of people who are excited about, interested in, and coming up against the same challenges as you are, because that is what really kind of feeds everything, and will kind of keep you going through through any kind of difficulties. Also, I think growing a kind of diversity of seed crops. I mean, in part, this is maybe people who've already dabbled a bit. This is advice for people who have already dabbled. Growing a few different seed crops can really improve your chances of success. So at Trill, Real Seeds always gave us a kind of handful of different things, maybe 3 crops that worked really well. And we know, we have the production system done. And then a couple which are either new or a bit of a kind of question mark of like, will this work? Won't this work? And then by having like a few different things, if there's a failure, it just doesn't feel as much of a disaster. So you've got, and that, that's the story of any kind of market garden. Grow a diversity, and different years are different, aren't they? So some things will work and some things won't work as well, and it still results in a kind of overall sort of success.
Yeah, so no surprise, I think any seasoned farmer would probably urge their younger self to not take on too much. I think once we had a few good seed contract experiences, it was like, we'll take all the seed contracts. And I know we had at least one year where we weren't quite following through on the quality and the quantity that we had intended with those, because they do take work. Like they're not the same kind of work with market farming where you are cutting salad mix every week and it feels frantic, but you can't just plant a bunch of lettuce and like ignore it and get a good seed crop, you know? So I think with doing a whole market farm thing with all the moving parts of that, and then having the seed crop, you know, I think we underestimated how much actual time and energy the seed crop really deserved. So yeah, that would probably be my biggest piece of advice is like take it slowly and or, you know, cut something else out. You know, like maybe if you're doing seed crops, don't go to market, you know, but don't think that they're just going to be great quietly without attention. I would say that probably the biggest reason to start and keep going is because it's very satisfying. So, you know, I think a lot of us get into this because we're super into plants and very curious about the world and enjoy seeing the process. And it's so satisfying to see it all the way to the end like that. And then to have that, I think, very beautiful tactile product that's so different from anything else we grow. It's just fun to like handle, you know, clean seeds and then to be able to plant those the next year and keep that cycle going. I think that's the reason enough to experiment with it, at least.
Now for words of advice from episodes 23 and 24. In episode 23, we hear from Stephen Silverbear McComber, who is based in Ganawage, which is a half-hour drive from me, so possibly the closest guest we've had on the farm. And then we head to Lebanon to hear from Leah Martinet Jannin and Ferdinand Beau of Buzuruna, Juzuruna.
Well, I thought about this in some ways. Well, the difference today than before was there's a lot more information easily available that wasn't. Like today, you got the internet, you got different things. Maybe before you had libraries, but a lot of that stuff wasn't in there, you know, like there is today. There's always been a lot of older people, and I'm getting to be one of them myself. That's what's really interesting, you know. I would take a couple and maybe choose one in particular for different reasons: food value, early maturity, long keeping, and trying to maintain that to make sure I keep a good quality seed from that. And that's what I would do. At one time, I grew different ones and I didn't know and all kind of stuff. And a lot of seeds I got earlier on were always mixed. So I don't even know, and I'm not a person that reads them, so I don't know that process. Now I know some stuff to do by selection, which selection is part of it too. But that's probably what I would do. I would probably just make what I grow based on what my needs are. So, you know, some varieties I used to, like my wife used to like to make pumpkin cookies and pumpkin pie. So there's, you know, 2 or 3 varieties that were very good for that. Some varieties are good to make soup. And then some of them are good for like using as a vegetable. And one of the things I just kind of naturally did when people would ask me, oh, what kind of squash do you think I should grow? I would always say, well, what do you want to use it for? Do you want to make pie? Do you want to make eat it as a vegetable? So these are things I would recommend. And I would say, if you want to grow 2 or 3 or one of the different families so the seed will stay good and pure, this is what you do. So that's what I would say myself. I would say, yeah, try to keep some seeds yourself. I would say, I think I would start with the beans, because I think beans are the easiest crop to grow, because you can grow it as a bush bean and you can put 3 seeds together and put it in a pot, a nice sized pot, and you get some seed off there. You can grow them on poles, and a lot will grow on there, and they're easier. So the way I keep my seed, especially from pole beans, I eat everything where I can reach, and what I can't reach, I let that go to seed. And I remember this Hugo, this look my garden, says, "Well, how do you pick those seeds way up How do you pick the beans way up there? I said, I leave them. I said, this is what I use, and what's way on top, that will be the seed. Oh, that's a good idea. I said, duh. So I think I would start with that. Probably I would say start with beans, and then again, you want to eat it as a string bean, bean salad, like with a green bean. It's good, or you can let it get larger and use it as a shell bean, as if you were using it as a lima bean, and then as a dry bean. Later, to incorporate it in a soup or a chili, or even a variety that's good for baking. So that's what I would recommend myself. And as you get more adventurous, then go into some different kind of squash or different kind of corns. And there's a wonders selection at furnace oil seed.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I feel like I don't have enough experience, so I consider myself still as a young seed grower. But what I noticed, because we receive at Buzuruna a lot of people that are involved in seed production preservation since years and years, sometimes 40 years. We share with them a lot. They explain to us a lot of things, and they give us a lot of tips. And sometimes they come back 1 year after and they say, what I said to you last time, just forget about it. I think it's really like the most, like the thing we need to keep in mind is that you just need to try and to do, and there is no one way to do or one reality in a way, because you can think that you should do this and that and this technique and that process for this kind of seed, and maybe you just meet someone else that is doing completely another techniques and use other way to do it, and then you just realize that there is a lot of way to do, and there is no scientific reality that is just always true, and it's just like experimenting, and it's trying and going back and forth, and even people that are doing seeds and preserving and producing seeds since 40 years, when you talk with them, they seem that they're not sure of anything. It just always new things are coming up, and new knowledge and new experiences, and it's always like a moving process, and you're still learning every season and every time you grow seeds again.
I mean, it's not compulsory that each farmer has to grow all of its own seeds. The nice thing of seeds it's that it can work in like a network, and they are very generous, the seeds. But if you are a market grower and you need to have diversity to your customers, you cannot do only one variety of cucumber or of zucchini by year, So what we saw is that there are farmers, they organize themselves as a network, and one say like me, I love this zucchini, it's my go-to, and I love to make the seeds of this, so this one will make this variety, and another one will make another one, and like this we share the duty, because it's already so hard to live from your farming production and vegetables specifically, to make a living out of it. So we cannot ask like to make too much duties on their shoulders, but not to see it as like a huge change in your practices, but just starting with maybe one variety, one species, that it's not so hard to let it longer in the garden to make the seed out of it, or maybe to make seed production at the same time of food transformation. Let's say for tomatoes, it goes very well together. You make the tomato sauce, you like to take the seeds out because the tomato sauce will be nicer without the seeds. So at the same time, you produce your seeds, and you make tomato paste. So it doesn't have work. So to see it like small changes, small possibilities, and not compulsory like a huge gap in your ways of working.
And we wrap up with hearing from Jared Zystro from the Organic Seed Alliance in episode 25. And I'll mention that in August of this year, so a few weeks after you're listening to this episode, Jared will be joining University of California as their new horticultural and specialty crops advisor for Humboldt and Del Norte counties. This is after 17 years with the Organic Seed Alliance. So I've really enjoyed working with Jared in many different ways at OSA, and I'm going to miss seeing him there, but I'm really excited to hear about his contributions in his new role. So good luck with that, Jared.
And one of the things that it took me a little while to realize is what I had mentioned earlier is the generosity of the seed growing community. I would tell my younger self to not be afraid to, of course, being polite and unaware of people's time, but not be afraid to reach out to seed growers, ask for advice, make connections. There's so much experience that is not written down that, the more of it is on this podcast now, but there's a lot that's out there that really comes from connecting with other seed growers. If I had a chance, I would maybe tell myself to, work on more seed farms to see the range of perspectives and scales. I had a chance, to sort of work on a really small farm. I worked with Nash up in Washington at kind of a larger scale of seed growing. But I think I would encourage myself to do a bit more of a tour, work on some more farms, see the different ways that people are approaching seed growing, and really feel comfortable in, making the attempt to just reach out and ask questions, because in my experience, people have always been so generous with their knowledge, and you gain so much from that. Even if you're not necessarily considering seed growing as an enterprise, as something that you're going to be directly, selling and making money from, there are so many benefits in developing and maintaining your own varieties as a market grower. I think one of the people I always kind of put in front of the mic around this question, there's a couple of local farmers in the area in my area that I work with, Jacques and Amy Newcomb, and they really have a good description of they have varieties at the farmers market, some of their melons, their cipollini onions, some of their tomatoes that are ones that they have basically been doing selection and seed saving on for, years and years and years now. And even though they're not selling the seed of them, what it's given them is varieties that no one else has, that have some really unique and appealing attributes. Like their cipollini onions are they're all single core, and they're all the other growers are just getting their seed from, the usual places where they've got kind of these multi-core cipollinis, and ours, are these single core that people come back for because they love them. And so it's an opportunity for you to have your own unique varieties that are adapted to your climate, right? Because a lot of seeds are being, selected and produced somewhere else in the country. So they're, if you do your own seed saving and selection, you can adapt those varieties to your climate, to your production conditions, like I was talking about with Blake, and, needing varieties that can do well in his really dense planting schemes, and also to your markets. So like Jacques and Amy, with being able to have varieties that they understand these are things that are going to really pop at the farmers market and are unique, and will be kind of calling cards that people come back to their stand because they're the only people that have them, because they save their own seed.
And that's another mini-sode of the Seed Farmer Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed these words of advice for seed people, and that they're inspiring you to go do the seed work that you do, or to start doing seed work if you've been thinking about it. Thank you to Semillas et Dalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at semillas-et-dalton.com. Thank you to Molly Breezebor for editing this episode. And thank you so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.